Hello, inmates. This is Octo coming at you with the 223rd week of the Cellblock Scorch. I hope you've been having a great week and that your weekend is going awesome too. This week's prompt was given by Cricket, and the prompt was, if any rich man ever lost a woman, it was to a person who could dance. Which is, a pretty fun little thing. Exciting use of person there. I really like what I wrote this week, and so did, Cricket, because that's why she chose it. But I hope you also enjoy it. I don't have much to say about it before we get into it, so I'm just gonna go for it. The title of this piece is Shall We Dance? Gilbert was getting pretty sick of the state of things by the end of the third night of the ball. Here he was, a gentleman in desperate need of a betrothed, a fiancé. At this point, he'd even accept a date that wouldn't ditch him halfway through the outing, and yet it seemed like nobody was willing to touch him with a 10-foot pole. It was ridiculous. Every night, he'd arrived with a beautiful woman accompanying him, someone he was entertaining the thought of wooing, and who had expressed an interest in being wooed. And every single night, that woman would ditch him halfway through the festivities to dance with a handsome stranger that seemed to be made of pure starlight more than anything else. For the first time in his life, Gilbert contemplated committing an act of violence against a Miraha. Usually, he'd never dare even think about harming the celestial beings that popped down from wherever they were living in the skies to mingle with the humans that caught their eye during the tricentennial Miraha ball. Terrible bad luck that was. But they were being a real nuisance. They were all somewhat incomprehensible to look at, as was the case with Miraha, but Gilbert was certain they were not the same person every time. They all had shining silver skin, true, but one had small freckle-like specks of night sky darkness across their cheeks, another had a distinctly bluish undertone to their skin, and on this night, the creature sizing up his date was sporting eyes the exact shade of the midday sun. The one thing they all truly had in common, besides their inhuman skin tone and general incomprehensibility, was that they were disgustingly good dancers. Gilbert was, he was not a good dancer. He knew this about himself, had tried to fix it, but the coordination and rhythm required to keep a partner from careening into nearby people was apparently beyond him. If ever a rich man were to lose a woman, Gilbert thought glumly, it would be to someone who could dance. And he was rich, stupidly so, just not rich enough to convince someone to keep him company through this dreadfully boring affair, and eventually agree to marry him, apparently. Typical. Gilbert sipped woefully at his glass of wine instead of chucking it at the Miraha du jour as she approached. She sparkled and shimmered like a thing immaterial, but was definitely solid enough to gently grasp Sasha, his date for the night, by the hand, and raise said hand to her lips? Maybe? Anatomy was confusing on Miraha, and on astral ones even more so, as they were made entirely of starlight. Couldn't even be sure how he knew this one was the she, to be honest. It was probably some bizarre Miraha power. "Might I interest the lady in a dance?" she asked, in a chiming, pleasant voice, shimmering just a little brighter as Sasha blushed in delight. Gilbert briefly entertained the notion of finding a nice balcony to throw himself off of. This was just getting embarrassing. Sasha glanced shyly at him, obviously hesitant about ditching him, and he dredged up a polite smile for her, tipping his head slightly and drawing on all the patience he had in his soul as a gentleman who wanted this nice woman to have a good time at the tricentennial Miraha ball, he said, "By all means, don't let me stop you." She smiled radiantly at him and followed the Miraha onto the ballroom floor. Gilbert plucked another wineglass from the waiter's platter as they passed by. He had two now. He did not care. Just started sipping from them alternately to entertain himself. At least Sasha had been considerate enough to check if he minded. On the first night, Talia had practically leapt into the Miraha's arms as soon as they looked in her direction. If nothing else, Gilbert thought to himself, I must have impeccable taste in partners, because the stars themselves are practically leaping out of the sky to snatch them away. It was not particularly comforting. Gilbert considered going for a third wineglass, just because. Maybe he'd learn to juggle them, and he could run away and join a circus and never have to be seen in high society again. It wasn't all bad, he supposed. At least he hadn't shown up yet. Why, my dear Gilbert, alone again? By sheer force of will, Gilbert both refrained from crushing the glasses in his hand to dust and rolling his eyes so hard they popped out of his skull. There he was. "Hello, Gwenner. How are you?" Gilbert said. He specifically did not make it a question. He didn't actually care, because Gwenner had come over to him for the last 3 nights and gloated at him about the state of his love life. Or, the lack thereof. Whatever. The point was, Gilbert wasn't feeling particularly charitable toward the Miraha, no matter how prettily his tan-white suit coat swirled like a clouded sky, or how nicely his reddish-brown skin and bone-white hair glowed from within in the customary, slightly unsettling way Miraha had. He wasn't sure what he was, exactly, but he was certainly no star. Gwenner preened slightly at Gilbert's not question, and answered it despite Gilbert's fervent wishes to the contrary. "I'm doing well enough, Gilbert, but my evening would be much improved by some company." "You and me both," Gilbert grumbled irritably under his breath, then quaffed the remaining contents of one of his wine-glasses and handed it to a passing waiter with a quiet, "Pardon me." He raised his voice enough for Gwenner to hear it over the general hubbub filling the room, but carefully no further. "Go get some, then. I'm sure anyone would be delighted to go for a spin with such an illustrious Miraha as yourself." "Ah, but what if they dislike dancing? What would you suggest I do?" Gwenner watched Gilbert lean sullenly backward against the wall, then fluidly settled himself next to him, leaning his weight onto one of his elbows in such a way that allowed him to peer quizzically down at Gilbert as he brooded. Gilbert entertained a mean little fantasy regarding the wall suddenly disappearing where Gwenner and his stupid, swishy hair were leaning, then responded. "I'd ask them why they were at a ball if they disliked dancing so much. Seems foolish of them." Doesn't it?" Gwenner grinned mischievously. "Probably." Again, it was hard to figure out what exactly Miraha's face was doing, what with the shifting facial features and general swirliness, but the feelings often came through loud and clear. "What are you doing here, Gilbert? I've seen you all 3 nights, and you've not danced with a single person despite bringing 3 different partners with you. You even turned me down twice so far." Instead of answering, Gilbert watched Sasha and the starlit Miraha swirl around the ballroom. They made a pretty picture, all dark blue fabric and shining silver, and Sasha was grinning hard enough that her eyes were practically pinched shut. Good for her. At least someone was having a nice time. Gwenner was apparently content to stare at the side of his head until he answered, though, so eventually Gilbert said, "It is expected that I attend the entire ball, since I arranged the event. It's bad luck for the coordinator to skip out, you know." Gwenner made a small noise of comprehension. "My compliments to your efforts. It's been simply lovely 3 days. One of the best tricentennials I've ever attended." That warmed Gilbert's cold, dead heart slightly. At least when he died alone as an old, crusty bachelor, he could take comfort in the fact that Gwenner thought he planned a mean party. He dredged up a small, very small, smile for Gwenner. "Thank you. It took me a year to plan it all out, and another to coordinate everything. You wouldn't believe how difficult it is to convince pastry chefs to work with Miraha-sent materials. You'd think it was sacrilegious the way they go on." "Really?" Gwenner asked, sounding entirely too interested in the woes of being an event coordinator. "Strange guy, this Miraha." "Well, I'd like to thank you for your efforts on behalf of all Miraha, then. We're certainly enjoying ourselves, especially the pastries." I'm glad somebody is." Gilbert considered, very briefly, that he was being unnecessarily ornery about the whole dying alone because he was terrible at dancing thing. He probably was. Oh well. Gwenner ducked down slightly and leaned a little closer, and Gilbert could feel heat radiating off him like he was the sun. This was impressive, considering the solid 6 inches or so still between them. "What's got you so down, Does it have anything to do with your partnerless state?" Gilbert fixed Gwenner with a gimlet eye. The Miraha beamed at him. Gilbert glared harder, but that just seemed to make Gwenner shine more brightly the longer he kept it up. "Miraha." Since he didn't have the strength of will to face off against someone who was probably older than the entire Earth, Gilbert eventually huffed and sharply looked away. "If you must know," he growled, "I was hoping to find someone to court during the ball." "Oh?" Gwenner asked, like he didn't know that literally everyone at the ball was also trying to do that. Why? Perhaps Gwenner was one of those Miraha that didn't come down to Earth often. Gilbert decided to give him the benefit of the doubt for the first time in 3 days. "It's good luck to start a courtship at the tricentennial ball. Something about celestial blessings." "Why are you looking to court someone?" Gwenner prodded, eyes narrowing slightly. Gilbert had no idea why this was happening, but this was the longest conversation they'd held so far, so he decided to keep going. "Because I'm lonely. Why else do you start a courtship?" "Don't you have friends?" Gwenner nodded at the refreshments table, where a trio of raucous teens were getting into a friendly scuffle over a cream puff. "That would make you less lonely." "I have friends," Gilbert snapped defensively, barely resisting the urge to stomp off and hide somewhere like he'd done the last 2 nights. Did he look like the sort of man who didn't have friends? Maybe that's why he couldn't get a date. "I'm not that kind of lonely. It's different." Gwenner smiled, a soft thing this time. Gilbert didn't trust it. "I know. Did you know that some planets don't have moons? Gilbert squinted at Glimmer, feeling rather like he'd lost the plot. No, I thought every planet had a moon. That was sort of how it worked, from what he understood. Miraha from planets generally kept company with their associated moons. Where those planets and moons came from was, of course, anybody's guess. Not really a question Gilbert bothered himself with. Stars just appeared in the sky, so perhaps the same was for the more solid Miraha? Well, it's more accurate to say that they don't have moons yet. It's something of a work in progress, but isn't it worth the effort not to be lonely? Wemmer sighed dreamily, unaffected by the fact that Gilbert was staring at him like he was insane. How could a planet not have a moon yet? I'm sure you understand, Gilbert. Gilbert frowned deeply, then took a breath in, ready to launch into a very polite diatribe against Glimmer's sanity. But he heard the tinkling bells that signaled the end of the tricentennial, and the end of the Miraha's time with mere mortals like Gilbert. He glanced out the window and watched as the stars in the sky flickered back into place. Were there more than before? It felt like it. But Gilbert was no astronomer. Glimmer's very, very hot hand dropped onto his shoulder, drawing Gilbert's attention back to him. It's been a pleasure as always, Gilbert. I'll see you at the next tricentennial, Perhaps next time we can spend a little more time together and a little less time matchmaking the stars. I won't be at the next tricentennial. I'll have been dead for 200 years, Gilbert informed him blandly. Wait. There was something weird about the way Glimmer phrased that. Before Gilbert could figure out what it was, Glimmer laughed heartily and patted his shoulder. Gilbert was pretty sure the fabric was getting singed under his hand. That's what you always say, darling. See you later. And with that, Glimmer disappeared in a swish of whitish cloud, leaving a burn mark on the floor where he'd previously stood. Well, whatever that was, Gilbert was certainly glad that he'd be long dead by the next time the tricentennial rolled around. Not sad at all that he wouldn't see Glimmer again. No siree. The thought echoed with an odd sense of déjà vu, but he brushed it off and busied himself with getting the party wrapped up. That was definitely not a problem he'd be dealing with today.
Okay, wow, oh my gosh. I just not recorded, I I just reread Octo's piece and then sprinted over here to record this for you without taking the time to organize my thoughts or make notes or anything because I wanted the joy still in my voice. Oh, what a piece! What a piece! Wow! Wow! I'm so delighted. I had no idea where it was going, and then the end happened, and I'm just filled with glee. Oh! Yeah, so anyways, that's why I picked it for the win. You can hear it in my voice. The other piece I got this week was from Styx, and it was really cute. It was just a lovely interpretation of the prompt, and I read it before Octo's and I was like, wow, this is really good. I like this so much. And then I read Octo's and I am absolutely just Twitter-pated, obsessed, enchanted. I love the mere aha and the way they're described and how the translation of a celestial being into the earth for however short a time. And then I loved our little main character fellow whose name has escaped me because I don't have the document up anymore and I don't know anything. Gilbert. I love Gilbert. I love the name Gilbert also. Shout out to my fellow Anne of Green Gables girlies. But Gilbert is so he's trying so hard and he's so cute. And then the conversation with Glimmer is so funny because you can tell that Gilbert is way more fond of him than he's letting on, but he won't admit it, not even to himself. And then at the end it's suddenly oh, there's a whole thing, some of the planets are lonely and they're trying to find their moons, and when the stars start appearing at the end of the centennial, there's more stars, and Glimmer is oh, we've been matchmaking the stars, and suddenly it's all of the people Gilbert brought who were stolen by mere ahas, they're also becoming stars somehow. When you start a courtship at the tricentennial, it's good luck, and apparently if you start a courtship with a mere aha at the tricentennial, you also become a celestial being. And Glimmer is, it would seem, a planet trying to collect a moon, and he's trying to pursue Gilbert and it's not working, or it's working very slowly. I love that they're always meeting and re-meeting at tricentennials, which either means there's reincarnation for everyone or specifically for people that the mere aha have partnered with but haven't fully connected with yet somehow. I think it's so interesting. I think this is so sweet. I would read 16,000 more stories about Glimmer and Gilbert and all of the other mere aha and this whole thing. I want to know how they first met. I want to know when Gilbert will eventually become a moon. Oh, I'm so in love with this piece. Um, yeah, just the utter delight in my heart. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. All right. I just re-listened to that back, and I have to add one more little comment, which was I love the detail that Gilbert sought out Miraha, like celestial ingredients to put into the pastries. Like, it shows how hard he's working to be a good host, but also I think it's kind of indicative of his longer connection with the celestial people and maybe with Gwemer specifically. And also, the other fear in my heart is that I'm mispronouncing all of the names in this because I did not compare notes with Octo. I don't know how she's going to have said any of them. Y'all are going to just have heard her piece, and then there's going to be my comments. And what if I'm pronouncing everything wrong? Um, but that is what it is. And you might say, that seems silly. Why would you worry about that? It happened a couple weeks ago on Styx's piece. I pronounced a name. I think I said Olivier, and I think Styx said it Olivier. So it could happen again here. This is the struggle of someone who reads a lot, is you just look at a word and you don't know how to say it. Anyway, though, back to Octo. I love this piece so much. I love this piece so much.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. It's kind of out of my usual wheelhouse. I don't usually just write romance, but I think this one turned out pretty well. I relate to Gilbert, poor little guy. He's just trying to live his life. He does not have time for these beautiful star people coming around, saying things to him, stealing his actual dates, and yet here he is. Gilbert's true problem, I would say, is not that he cannot get a date, but that he is he is more dense than a neutron star. This man could not sense flirting if it was literally frisbeed at him like a death disc. Gwemer has been trying this, I want you to know, since I wrote this, and I know this, Gwemer has been trying to woo this man for literal millennia. There's a certain implication of, reincarnation happening here that I'm not getting into. He reincarnates. He's essentially the same person every single time. One day, Gwemer will, actually get him to notice that he's flirting with him, and then they can go live and be beautiful star people together. But, when will that day come? Unclear. Gwemer has the patience of a saint, and I love that for him. But what the Miraha are, as, you probably guessed, is they are celestial bodies. All the starlight people are, stars of various types, and people like Gwemer are actually planets. Gwemer specifically is Venus. I hope if you look back on it and think about his fancy little outfit and his general coloring, that it's like, oh, duh, it's Venus. The reason I chose Venus is because out of all of the planets in the solar system, Venus and Mercury are actually the only two that don't have moons. And I think that Venus is more interesting to look at than Mercury. So the reason that Gwemer is so ridiculously hot and singes things and whatever is because the surface, temperature of Mercury is ridiculous and also covered in acid rain. So this man is a walking, demolition area, actually, but he's just so friendly, it's fine. He won't hurt nobody. And let's see, anything else exciting about this universe? I think it's fun, the idea that the planets just pop down and, if they like somebody, they just, move them a little and then they can go be planets forever together. Why not? This sounds great. I think that's really it on thoughts that I've had about this. It's pretty straightforward. There's no, bigger universe here. It was fun. I will probably do nothing with it ever again because if I think about it too hard, it becomes too complicated. But, it's cute. Pray for Gilbert. One lifetime he'll get it. Let's see. I prompted next week because, I won this week. And the prompt that I gave for 224B is, why are you always asking me for advice when that thing on your shoulder is so much better at giving it? Did I give this prompt because I was mentally imagining Kronk in the Emperor's New Groove and his shoulder angel and shoulder devil? Maybe. Couldn't tell you. I should start writing down why I gave prompts, apparently. And I chose Red as the winner because she's very funny. And I liked her piece a lot, so I hope you look forward to reading that. Or listening to that, I guess. I read it. As always, I would love any questions or comments or whatever else you have to give to me. I don't have any relevant questions to respond to currently, but As always, check out other people's Ko-Fis, check out the Patreon. We've got a whole bunch of cool stuff on there, and Bones works really hard to make it look nice and be accessible and stuff. If you ever feel like reading the other ones, please just, go and sign up for the Patreon. You will not regret it. There's a lot of good writing in there that just doesn't get chosen, because sometimes there's something better and sometimes it's just not the vibe. And I think that's it for me, folks. Keep that fire burning and have a great week.
The Cellblock Scorch is a production of Stellacore, an independent group of nerds sharing their obsessions with the world. We can be reached at thestellacore@gmail.com, through comments on your podcast platform of choice, our Instagram, Stella_core, and at our YouTube, also called Stellacore. Feel free to check out our other productions on our YouTube channel or our cosplays on Instagram. If you would like to support our creative endeavors, you can give a one-time tip to the Ko-Fi of the writer of your favorite Scorches, or check out our Patreon, linked in the show notes. There, you can access the winning Scorches and episode transcripts for free, or sign up for Spark level support for $5 a month to gain access to all of the Scorch submissions.